Bienvenue. Welcome once again to another property live stream. This is, of course, Property Quorum. And here I have with me Hamish McClay, the person who initiated this whole thing in the first place, Silas J. Lees, friend of the show, week around, and of course, Zara Oliburgers of Nexa Law, one of our tame property lawyers. And what we're going to do today is throw around a couple of ideas, particularly focused, as usual, on the current property scenario. We call it the 400 million fall-through problem. I'm not entirely sure what that is, but to set it all straight, make it as clear as glass, Hamish McClay.
I'm not so sure that 400 million is quite the right price, but Silas, I'm sure, will be able to inform us of that. But it's something which never goes away. But however, it doesn't stay in the headlines for terribly long. Somebody thinks, oh, we'll speak about that this time. And the next time it will be about the situation that Zara is actually sort of in, which helps to contribute to this aspect of the falling through, where the number of transactions sort of fall through. And in many, many instances, there no blame. If one wanted to attach blame, can it be attached to the individual situation? It is unfortunate. It's actually life, and life happens. And as a consequence, things do change for people who want to get involved with the property. But when we look at the scenario, and we listen to Silas mention this an awful lot, because many of us forget this, is that of the number of properties that estate agents actually have on the market at any one point in time, round about 50% of those won't be sold for a number of reasons. So the estate agent is really in a very difficult sort of spot, because they're putting all their efforts into selling 100% of the properties, and with only 50% of them happening, which is very difficult for those who are involved with that particular aspect of what's going on right at the very, very front end. But of course, if we did add to the back end what it does actually cost in the minds of people who find themselves within the whole transaction process, it really does compound quite significantly. But we'll let it unfold a little, and let Silas explain probably some of the depths that it does actually go to. Is that 400 million pound right that Rightmove mentioned? Rightmove would get it wrong for an awful lot of reasons, but
can you please give us a bit more nitty and gritty?
Well, thank you both. I'd love to throw some statistics on the table for this discussion, because as Hamish says, I do think this 400 million figure is very light. If you were to ask me honestly, 400 million to me represents just the money that is being sucked out of the conveyancing sector in referral fees. Okay. And as Hamish has quite rightly pointed out, estate agents are only selling between about 47, 53% of the properties that they list. Now, when you consider last year, we're told that there were 1.2 million transactions last year. Okay. So if only half of the properties that are being listed are being sold, probably means there was about 2.4 million properties on the market at any one time. Of the 1.2 million that sold, 1 in 3 will have fallen through. And the cost to the consumer alone, okay, we've worked it out at about 1.368 billion. That's just to the consumer. The cost to the estate agency profession alone, just on fall-throughs, is close to 1.3 billion. Okay, and it gets progressively worse the more you start to look at this. If we compound in the withdrawals, as Hamish has talked about, you can practically double that amount of money that is lost through fall-throughs to estate agents, which again is money that is desperately needed to hire the best talent into the industry and to improve systems and all the rest of it. But then if we look at the cost to lenders and mortgage brokers, etc., We're talking, our research suggests at least 50 billion a year is lost in mortgage lending. And I would argue it's probably closer to well over 100 billion when you take into account the withdrawals as well. So there's this pervasive myth in the industry that you can't sell houses without Rightmove. And it seems that even if you have Rightmove, you can't actually sell houses either. So this is not to point the finger of blame at Rightmove, but the point is the structural foundations of the property market are just not working. And it's not only the consumer that bears the brunt of it, it's actually the wider industry. And this is what I can't understand when we have such a big problem. Why more of the heads of these organizations aren't pulling together to try and solve it? Because there's a lot of talk, there's precious little action, unfortunately, and unfortunately every year this is costing consumers billions, and the wider industry tens, if not hundreds of billions, which could actually go in towards, improvement of public services and improving the roads and fixing all the potholes that we keep talking about, and ad infinitum. So that's some statistics to get the conversation started, and those are not just PFA statistics, and they're not plucked from air. That is hard research over the course of about 3 months that's evidenced those numbers. So 400 million, very light in my opinion.
Wow. Zara, what the hell's going on?
I think you need to look at the underlying story there.
Oh, I'm going to settle in with my pipe. Come on, off you go. What's the underlying story?
Well, we've got all these issues going on with leaseholds, cladding. Yes. Our buildings not being built properly, bits of papers that have been forged. You've got the EWS one where that surveyor was.
Yeah, I remember that. My God, yes.
Charging everybody for a little bit of paper with a tick box, people relying on it. So you've got things like that going on. But take, for example, something that happened to me yesterday. I've got a client who's buying a leasehold flat. He's all ready to go. I've got his mortgage offer in. He's done all his onboarding. I get an email from him yesterday saying, I don't know if anyone's told you, but the seller's changed his mind and he's going to rent the flat out instead. I mean, after going through all of that and then the seller changing their mind, how is that his fault? He's ready. I'm sitting and waiting with a mortgage offer. Everything has been done. I just needed the paperwork, and nobody had the courtesy to tell me that, the seller had changed their mind. So you're talking about, buyers pulling out, sellers do it too. I had a lady she's still trying to sell her house. She found a buyer. They didn't want to complete until this year because we were close to Christmas, and I could have had them in well before Christmas. And they decided all of a sudden that they did want the house, but they would, my selling client would have to wait because they were having issues with their parents who were elderly and needed care. So, do you wait? Life gets in the way. I don't agree that reservation agreements are the way to go. I think for estate agents to stop the bleed, they need to do what solicitors do and tell sellers if they're serious. You still get your big commission and you're taking your costs out of that. Work out what your costs actually are per sale and charge the seller up front. So if they change their mind, it's the seller that's lost out, not the estate agent. It's a bit like when you go to the restaurants these days, you don't pay for your meal after you've eaten in case you scoot. You pay for your meal before the food arrives.
Wow, is that the model we're going to? Hamish, it seems the world is going a little bit crazy.
Well, I don't think it is going crazy. There hasn't really been a change. I think that the challenge is these are issues which have been with us for a long time. It's just that the cost is going up at an extortionate rate because of a number of things. The properties are costing more. The estate agents have higher costs. The solicitors have higher costs. Many solicitors are being sort of driven out in actual fact. So there aren't as many solicitors as we would like of the appropriate sort of quality. And when you actually sort of start combining everybody's costs that do go up, it's not surprising that all of these costs, but it comes back to this one immortal aspect. We're very, very good at burying our heads in the sand. And this is what happens with so many aspects, particularly within the property sector generally. There's a lot of things that basic people forget about. And of course, because of that, it's almost like this. What a surprising thing to say. We're losing 400 million, which, as Silas says, is well way below. But it's out there. It's happening. It's like Zara pointed out. We've got these cladding issues going on all the time. We've got these corrupt people just signing pieces of paper because they get paid for signing pieces of paper, not for doing any work. And it's one of those things which seems to be accepted, like the inappropriate sort of building materials that were used on properties over the years. It's an accepted thing. And every now and again, it bubbles up like volcanoes sometimes. But it is it's such a damaging impact, really, on what is going on with property. And there's so many solutions to it that, unfortunately, people are speaking about it, but not getting on with it. And the thing, we've got two people here who actually know the worst end of what does go on. And I think we have to use the C word. We have to sort of say there's a lot of corruptness sort of going on out there.
Oh, phew, for a moment. I wonder which C word you meant. Sorry about that.
And that does indeed add to the cost to the consumer, as so many of these other aspects do.
Silas, I have no problem using that C word, or any C word in the right context. Right, so we seem to have this problem where it's sliding downhill. No one's willing to put the brakes on.
Fantastic observation, Gareth, and I think you're right. I mean, one of the things that we've looked at extensively is what we call gatekeeping. So it's a level of corruption in my eyes, but gatekeeping within the industry, where there are certain positions or bodies or individuals or businesses that have risen to a position of authority that don't actually want to get this problem solved because they get paid regardless of whether the public move. And as Zara's quite rightly pointed out, there is an element, a very, very strong argument, and it's one that I favour, of estate agents charging up front. And the reason they don't, or a lot of them won't do it, is because they have been completely commoditised. So the best estate agents, along with the very worst, are all operating on this level playing field that is a portal which is given them access to their properties to the public. And there is precious little for the average consumer to distinguish between a good practicing estate agent and a really bad one. And this, I think, is perpetuated all the way through the industry, where you look at things like Property Mart, for example, who have announced Angela Rayner as their guest speaker for the Property Mart 1 event, which has not been met with particular grace and favour amongst the good practicing estate agents because of the obvious elements around why she lost her job in the first place. So I think we need much higher standards, and we need a badge or a label of honour of some description to separate out the very best from the rest. And that is the only way we're going to resolve this problem, because the gatekeepers are firmly rooted in and entrenched in their positions. They're not prepared to budge, even though the solutions, as Hamish has already talked about, are already there that could solve all of these problems. And so you have to look at that element of corruption, whether it's purposefully or by design. And spilling out from that, there is so much more available to the conveyancing profession, to mortgage brokers, to estate agents, to banks and lenders to solve this problem. So it begs the question, do we allow these gatekeepers to keep their entrenched interests as priority above the consumer and above everybody else in the industry? Or is it time to actually oust them and actually create a movement for change that will actually free up the housing bottlenecks and actually allow everybody to profit? And I favour the second option there.
Zara, what are your thoughts?
Well, movement for change definitely means stop, paying referral fees to estate agents, because that's
Right.
where all the bottlenecks have arisen, because the work is fed to firms that treat their clients like a tin of beans. And so you put along a conveyor belt and there's no continuity, that you'd speak to the same person twice and that your job's being done properly, not by somebody living in another country. Because if there's something going on in that country, it affects us here because the work's not getting done.
I've just had a message pop up. I would love your comment on it. 400 million lost each year from failed property sales are a serious concern. Too many transactions collapse after costs are already paid, creating financial pressure and uncertainty for homeowners. We need a smarter, more reliable property process that protects people and reduces avoidable losses. Surely, broadly speaking, you're in agreement with that, yes?
Yes, but you're going to get fall throughs because the legal stuff is very complicated. And as I've been doing this for over 20 years, if you look at things from the 1980s, 1990s, the documents are a lot simpler from when the land was split, new build. Nowadays, if you look at a new build transfer, it reads like a lease, and you've got developers basically setting up their stations so they can continue to retain an income stream via management companies for state service charges, or they're selling the freeholds of buildings to private investors. But there was an analogy I heard the other day about ignoring the dragon. So you've got a little pet dragon that comes along and it keeps chirping at you, and then you give it some food and you ignore it. And so the dragon gets bigger and bigger, and then there's going to come a point when you can't ignore it and it's going to start breathing fire. So that's where we are now. We're trying to deal with the fire. So, there's a lot of work to be done by people who mean well, but there's others who want, as you say, Silas, want to retain the status quo because they get paid regardless. The government are only interested in looking after the developers because it's all about the numbers and the number of houses they're built. But, you look at the consequences of doing that. Councils are allowing developers to build on known floodplains. There was that programme on New Build Nightmares on ITV the other day, where, the condition about the flood risk report wasn't satisfied before the buildings were complete, and you could see the images of the site actually being flooded before the properties were completed. That is just a waste of everybody's time and money to build properties like this that will become uninsurable. So, for me, I'm saying you need to start at the beginning, from where we start, the people who build our homes. Once we get that bit sorted, it will get better. The people campaigning to get rid of leasehold because of high service charges, you're still going to have that service charge issue. You're still going to have issues with transparency. Who's in control? Are the public ready to take responsibility for fire safety, where they could end up in prison if they haven't done it? And a lot, ignorance is not a defense, is it?
No, goodness no. Silas, it seems like we have another weird story arc for how to train your dragon. Certainly keep it off your furnishings. Your thoughts?
I love that analogy, actually, and you can apply that so perfectly to the issue of referral fees in the industry, because that's exactly what's gone on. We created this whole business model where estate agents get paid for introductions, and that has grown and grown and grown now to be completely out of control. When you look at the numbers, I would argue that progressively, for almost all law firms that are paying referral fees, all of their profit is being paid out in that referral fee. So there's absolutely no incentive for conveyancers to move faster. And this is not pointing the finger of blame at conveyancers and saying you're really bad at what you're doing. Not at all. It's the broken business model that relies upon estate agents charging less and less and less. And the only way they can make their business model work is to claw it back through hidden referral fees. I actually had a national estate agent say to me that estate agency is the break even, referral fees are the profit. Okay, and when the whole industry is operating on that level, it doesn't work, and it's proving that it's not working because transaction times have got progressively longer over the last 5 years. We need a more profitable housing market for the practitioners. We need a less stressful housing market for the practitioners and the consumers. And with that reinvestment and lower stress levels, the market will start to free up. And that's, without the issues that Zara's raised, of course, with house builders building houses that are not fit for purpose. And I think we have this really weird culture now of selling sound bites to people. We're going to build all these houses, or our aim is to invest in sustainable housing. Well, great, but what about the houses that have been built, the thousands, tens of thousands of houses that are no longer fit for purpose? And as we've seen on cladding matters, are tinder boxes that could ignite at any moment. And that's the issues that we're sort of dealing with. So we can free up the housing market, but if the quality of the product is defective, we're not going to get very far.
Yes, of course, Silas is preparing tomorrow's session, Cladding Matters at 1 o'clock. Please do be there. They got a messaging, because Zara and I often chat behind the scenes, and Zara is making a couple of valid points. First of all, the one iniquity in all of this is the huge commissions that agents get within this. The conveyancers seem to lose out on this, and that hence these referral fees. But it reminds me of the way in which in the States the servers rely entirely on tips now. It's become not so much a thing that one would like to do. It's you have to do it because they've got no other means of sustaining them. And the other thing is, and Zara's pointed this out, if you left it to people, Joe Schmo in the street, to pick their own conveyancers, you might actually get a bit of movement. What do you think? What do you think to that, Silas?
It's an interesting observation. I mean, years ago when I was in agency, we would make recommendations, but it was never based on a kickback or a referral fee. It was just the fact that these solicitors actually got on with it and did the job. And this was before email, before the modern communication methods. And so I think Zara's right. There is an element of that of finding the right people. It's where we've got these nefarious practices, and I'll highlight one that was done in the Panorama program last year. We had a national estate agent that was allegedly caught on camera doing conditional selling practices, which are illegal. I
remember this. It was shocking to me. Well, it shouldn't have been shocking to me, I guess.
Well, what was more shocking to me is we can own it if somebody makes a mistake, right? Or if somebody does something out of naivety. But the real shock for me was when I followed up 6 months later, 7 months later, what has actually happened since then, which regulator has stepped in to police this, which corporate body or trade body has actually stepped in to police this, and has the company themselves done anything, or have they just chosen to sweep it under the carpet? And I think we can all guess what the outcome of that has been. Now, this is particularly damaging in a profession that the public just do not trust. The Ipsos Veracity Index has rated again estate agents amongst the least trusted profession in the country. And so it's not doing itself any favors when it's exposed on camera and nothing is actually done about the core issues there. So there's a lot that needs to be addressed, but the good news is the solutions are there, but we can't just carry on and perpetuate with the status quo and think everything's going to be rosy, because that's led us to where we are today.
It just seems to be a bit like the Emperor's no clothes. We know he's got no clothes, but we're willing to let him parade around in the nude. Hamish, would you care to take us home?
Indeed, it does all lead to a certain extent around one particular funnel, and it's the absence to change. The absence to change that in people's mind, they want to maintain that status quo. And as we said, that status quo isn't any longer a status quo, because unfortunately the costs have spiraled. And an interesting thing that came up, and Gareth and I we had a fascinating character on a podcast earlier this week on our construction matters, who spoke about a very significant way of reducing and taking away so many flooding issues on developments. And why isn't that idea taken up? Because it would not just save money, it will reduce the cost of actually sort of putting up sort of houses and all the rest of it. and would resolve the particular issues that Zara spoke about. It's people are not aware of it yet, but even when they become aware of it, and Silas pointed this out, I can't remember which podcast it was on, when he actually was working on his qualifications, he actually wrote about modern methods, modern practice methods for construction that would take the costing out. Are we doing that? Have we introduced those from 25 years ago? No. We haven't even seen those yet. So as Silas repeatedly says, and Zara does, there are solutions. We need to take the steps to change if you like, the minds of the people that they're sat there saying, no, it's all right. We're still making a profit. We're still making a profit. We're quite happy with it. There's so much that can be done. And in actual fact, there is light there. There's a tremendous light there. What we need is that movement of creativity of people saying, we are going to change it and actually do something about it.
Well, we've got a comment before I put that comment up. The previous comment was from Spencer, who I think has commented and also been on the show at some point. Now, here's Christine. Part of the problem is leaving consumers to pick their own. Many don't know what to look for and ultimately go for the cheapest. It's a race to the bottom. I'll leave you to have your own thoughts about that one. Thank you so much, Hamish McClay, for stewarding this show. Zara, many thanks for your sage and frankly pointed ideas. And Silas, thank you for being the voice of reason. Until next week, please try and keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and please come along tomorrow to Cladding Matters. It's usually a very good show. Please, until next time I see you all, goodbye.